Do you find yourself resorting to and endlessly justifying eating very unwell when you're under stress? Well, you're not alone, and there are some simple changes that you can make to eat healthier during those difficult times. So in today's video, Dr. Louise is joining us again, and we'll be discussing our top 5 tips for continuing or even starting to eat well, even when you are feeling overwhelmed by stress. So welcome again to Eat and Live Free. I'm Alisia Young, and on this channel, you'll find videos about nutrition with an emphasis on overcoming emotional eating and junk food dependency, along with mindful movement practices. I'm also a pro trainer for the Canadian fitness company canfitpro, and they certify fitness instructors, personal trainers, and healthy eating and weight loss coaches, along with providing continuing education credits. In particular, I facilitate their healthy eating and weight loss, so their HWL certification course, both online and in person. So again, welcome back to my friend and scientist and fellow pro trainer for CanFit Pro as well, Dr. Louise.
Well, thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited. I am not your usual personal trainer. I have a PhD in organic chemistry. You mentioned the scientist part. That's where it comes from. And a fitness and health educator. I own Neuromotion Wellness, where I train older adults and I teach older adults and people in general about brain health. And like you, I am also a pro trainer. I teach the personal training specialist certification. And so I see a lot of new trainers coming in the door, which is very excited. And I also just finished collaborating with canfitpro on their active aging certificate. So if you want to check it out, we'll put the link in the description below.
Awesome. Thank you again, Dr. Louise, and let's go.
Let's do it.
Our first tip, of course, is to plan ahead, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I'm sure you've heard that quote many a time. And so this is why we want to start with this tip, to plan ahead. And for example, this can mean having a schedule of when you are planning to eat, when you're planning to plan your plan for what you're going to eat, when you're planning to get those items, if you are going grocery shopping, or even if you're going to be using a meal delivery service as well. This also includes having a list so that when you do go to get your items, or if you are inputting what items you're looking to get, that you actually know what it is that you're looking for. And if you are going somewhere to get something to eat, it's really important as well to do your absolute best to eat before you go, because we can really convince ourselves of things in moments where, you know, there's layouts and there's bright lights in these grocery stores and promotions where they're like, you need this item, or you may have a craving for something. You're like, I need this item, and you can really rationalize with yourself. So do your best to eat and at least have a really good snack before you go out and actually get your items as well.
Absolutely. So the way that I do my planning, I like to divide it, divide and conquer. I usually do my planning. So looking at what do I want to eat for the next few days, where am I going to go and buy that stuff? So I will do the prepping of my list, usually on Fridays, and then I will go grocery shopping on Saturdays, and then I will do my cooking on Sundays or later on if I need to. So divide and conquer, it's been working for me. Nowadays, I actually use artificial intelligence to help me with making my list. So I've created different prompts that help me come up with the list, figuring out what do I want to eat a little faster, and then I go and do my shopping. So if you're interested in learning more about how I use artificial intelligence for my meal prepping, feel free to contact me.
Yes, that sounds great. And of course, as always, you can always find Dr. Louise's contact information in the description as well. And I especially enjoyed how you mentioned that you like to separate it, because it can feel very overwhelming to try to do everything, like the figuring out what meals and then making the list and going to get the stuff and then coming back and prepping or even cooking all in one go. It's very overwhelming. So I find that I do that as well, is I separate it into separate tasks as well, to help make it more manageable. And another way for making things fast as well is batch cooking, because when we're stressed, we don't have an abundance of time, or at least it feels that we don't have an abundance of time. So we want to make things as easy and quick for us as possible. And another way that you can do that is by batch cooking. So batch cooking is where when you make a large batch of food, and so that will support you through multiple meals, and there's different ways that you can do that. One of my favorite ways to do that is through making things like casseroles. So I like to do like casseroles. I like to do stir fries. I like to have a lot of variety and a lot of flavors in the things that I'm eating. One of my favorite things is a mixture of it has rice, it also has black beans, it has shredded chicken, it has seasonings, for example, like Mexican Tex-Mex type seasoning. And then I like to put some coconut milk in there as well. That's actually cooked into the rice. I bake that all, can also sprinkle some cheese into it, depending on what I'm feeling like that week. But it's just an easy thing where you can do a lot of mixing and matching as well.
That sounds so good. I want to have some. Some of the meal prepping or batch cooking that I do, I actually use my freezer quite a bit. I started doing that during COVID, because I like to have something that is easy to get out of my freezer in case I need, something to eat. I have this like vegetable soup that I got from, I'm Swiss, so I have some Swiss recipes. So I have a big pot, and I will make like that big pot of vegetable soup, and then I will freeze that soup in smaller parts, and that will allow me to get multiple. It actually lasts me for months, sometimes because I don't do it every day. But I put it in the freezer, and then I just take it out whenever I need it. Another thing that I do is I will do my own pesto and bolognese sauce. The pesto sauce, I actually don't use any cream. I supplement that, or I substitute that with avocados. It's really good. I love it. And so I will again make a big batch, and then I will freeze these in smaller parts. So I use an ice cube tray to freeze the sauce in smaller parts. That way, again, same thing. I have a whole bunch of it, and then that can last me a few months.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's really good too that you have, like, you shared with us different styles of batch cooking, because I think sometimes when discussing with people, when they're like, "Oh yeah, batch cooking," it's commonly thought of things like that you just put it in the oven and then you eat it throughout the week, but you've also discussed that you can make large portions and separate them into the freezer, and then even things like what you mentioned about putting it into like ice cube trays, and then so the variety of how long you can store things for as well, and the nature of the dishes that you can be making, like sauces and main meals, is it's great. And it sounds great because I also love avocados too. And speaking of avocados, this is also a common ingredient in a lot of smoothies. And so smoothies is another thing to consider when eating, doing your best to maintain eating nutritiously when feeling super stressed. And I would even consider smoothies to be another type of batch meals. So smoothies are typically, they typically have vegetables and fruits in them. Sometimes it's just pure greens, but the fruits can really help to make the greens sometimes more palatable. So I find for myself personally that smoothies is a major way that I continue to regularly eat healthy, especially when I'm super stressed. And I usually make like maybe 2 to 3 smoothies at a time. You don't want to make them too far in advance because they are natural whole food. If you don't consume them quickly enough, they can go rancid, and they lose their potency of those nutrients. And so when it comes to smoothies, although we're recording this video at, as we're changing into another season, and right now we're actually among the myths of our time change, one of our favorite, I don't know, it's our favorite time of the year, but nonetheless, we still have daylight savings. So it's still something that we do. But the reason I mentioned that is because, it's not something like smoothies is something you want to consider for the time of the year that you're consuming it, because it is pretty cold in nature. And so, fall, winter, you want to be consuming more warm types of foods. But summer, spring, that time of year, it's a really great go-to. When it comes to smoothies, some of my favorite types of smoothies to have include avocados. So that's why got really excited, Dr. Louise, when you talked about adding avocado to make your pesto super creamy. I love avocado. And I my go-to smoothies are ones that have a baby spinach. I'm trying to really add more like bitters and more varieties of greens, but that's, because I find it to be a mild tasting green, and I like to add lots of frozen berries like blueberries, blackberries, so that you get that high profile of the antioxidants. And then I use avocados quite a bit because I don't know if I've used the word allergic, but highly sensitive to raw bananas, like get really bad stomach aches from them. So as a alternative, I'm end up using like avocado for the healthy fat, but I also use mangoes as a replacement. Mangoes and pineapples as a replacement for the common ingredient of bananas. So those are just some ideas for how you can incorporate smoothies and why it's great to incorporate them, especially when super stressed.
I love it. And going off of, you mentioned like antioxidants and spinach, that made me think about the Mind Diet, which is a specific diet that has been developed to help the brain. So it has some neuroprotective effects. And part of that diet, it basically has 10 types of foods that are encouraged, and then five that you want to try and avoid. And obviously, within the 10 foods that are encouraged, the leafy greens are the most important. So get that from your smoothies. Obviously, other vegetables, berries, particularly blueberries that have lots of antioxidants as well, different nuts and all of that. So if you want to read more about that and what food to avoid, like, I don't know, junk food and sweets and all that, feel free to check out the newsletter. The link will be in the description.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for adding that as well. So we have talked a lot about different ingredients. So for example, Dr. Louise mentioned the Mind Diet. And so when you read her article, you'll learn more about the different ingredients that are suggested to be consuming and to avoid there. And I was talking about smoothies, and we were talking about different ingredients and ways to combine them. But these all connect to the fundamental skill of learning how to cook. So we want to be able to understand this process. And so that's why this is a major tip to really just journey into that process of learning how to cook. And I'll share that when I was younger, I didn't know how to cook. And so something that was really beneficial for me was to take a course in my last year of high school where you learn how to cook. And so I took a nutrition course in high school, but also a cooking course where you learn your way around the kitchen. You learn how to follow recipes, and you learn what all the utensils, the pots and pans are for. You learn all of that. And I think that was one of the best courses that one could take. I wish that it was essential, just like personal finance. But anyways, that's a different conversation to be had. But the reason that I want to emphasize this is because there's so many ways in this world to learn how to cook. You don't just need to go, take a course in high school, or you can take a college course, whether that's in person or online. You can also, there's books where they teach you how to cook. You can study culinary arts if you wanted. So there's many different ways to go about it. And so I found that even though I learned that in high school, as I was getting older, I just started to desire to become more confident in the kitchen, because I personally do not like cooking. I find it very tedious, and I just don't enjoy it. And I really wanted to shift that mindset because it's so essential for living. So I wanted to genuinely get to a point where I enjoy it. And so I know a few people who are chefs, which is really cool, and they really inspired me to look into maybe there's a way I can study more about learning. And so I learned about some culinary arts online programs. Not necessary if you don't want to become a chef, but this is a way that you can venture to learn into how do I get better and how do I get more confident. So in a future video, I'm looking forward to sharing more about that. But just to give you some ideas, so you can't use it as an excuse if you feel like you can't cook now. There's so many ways to start to learn. So no excuses on that one.
Let me just tell you that for the first probably almost 30 years of my life, I didn't know how to cook. the first thing I learned how to cook actually when I was little was crepes, aka pancakes, but from scratch. So that I knew how to do. But up until my late 20s, it was just plain pasta, plain rice, nothing like I didn't know much how to cook. Now I did a PhD in organic chemistry where in my mid to late 20s, all I did was, adding some little powders to a flask and then adding some solvent and then making it simmer but not boil and learning all of that. And it just happened that by the end of my PhD, when I was moving into writing my thesis and doing less lab work, I also started going to the gym more and I started cooking. And as I was doing less lab work, I felt like I needed something to do with my hands. And so I actually took those skills, which I thought were actually quite similar to cooking. So I took those skills and then I started putting that towards cooking and trying different recipes and trying and the best thing around that is I can eat what I make. Everything that I would make in the lab was quite toxic, so we did not want to go any close to it. But everything that I was making at home was great food. And then from there, it was very, very similar because in an experiment, I would, get a procedure and have to follow all the steps carefully and properly. It's the same with a recipe and learning how to do that was very simple, or how to transfer that was very simple to do for me. And so I actually just ended up cooking more just because I was doing less lab work, and that worked out pretty well. But it took me a while to really get into it and to find the recipes that I really liked. And then obviously I always over the years I've got a whole bunch of different recipes from online, from cookbooks like you mentioned. And then I have my go-to quick recipes, and then I have the more involved recipes where I can spend more time. I actually personally enjoy cooking. Now, I find that it kind of clears my head. It gets me to do multiple things at once. So and it's actually really great for your brain as well. But I enjoy the cooking, but sometimes I don't have time. So I go back to, my nice chicken and broccoli with brown rice, which is made really quickly. Very, very bodybuilding like,
Yeah,
yes.
the bodybuilder staple.
Yes, but it's been working for me in terms of I actually like and add spices and different things so that it's not just plain chicken, broccoli, and rice, but make it pop a little bit. Um, it works for me, but yeah,
Yeah.
I get bored as well. So then you gotta find different things to make it more interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I enjoy hearing you talk about that shift or the connection between chemistry or organic chemistry and cooking, because something that we recently learned about each other is we went to the same university. What are the odds of that? But we crossed paths, but we didn't meet each other until a few years ago. I'm so glad we met. But like my experience of chemistry is like pure terror. Like when I remember taking organic chemistry and like chemistry, and I was stressing so much before the labs. Like in the labs, I was stressing I was gonna break this glass item. I was stressing that something's gonna like overflow out of the beaker. I was stressing that somehow like a toxic fumes would go into the room, or somebody else might create toxic fumes and then I would die. So my whole experience, and maybe I transferred that not to the same level of intensity, but that same vibe to cooking. Like I worry, oh, I'm scared I'm gonna cause a fire. I'm scared all this stuff is gonna pour over. I'm scared I'm gonna burn. Like I just this fear and this like nervousness. So it's like this desire to overcome that and to become confident. So hearing you speak about it and see it like just explaining, oh yeah, the transfer, like the transferable skill and that natural enjoyment is it's so lovely to hear.
And I will say it was much less toxic. We did have a fire in the lab when I was doing there were a few things that happened. Still okay, but gotta be careful and make sure that, when I was TAing and helping students, I always wanted to make sure to reduce the stress as well. That, there's no point in chemistry can be somewhat enjoyable now. I like it, so I will share it happily. Yes. I wish I had you as my student.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been lovely. Very cool. And yes, and so now when it comes to cooking, of course, Dr. Louise, you shared about your enjoyment of the more involved recipes and then the ones that are really quick. And that can speak to the fact, especially if we're super stressed, that we cannot always plan ahead for everything. We get surprised sometimes. And so our final tip is to have a plan to the best of your ability, but also have backups in place because life just happens like to all of us. And so, something that is really emphasized, like I know when I'm teaching the healthy eating and weight loss coaching certification or course that's offered through canfitpro, is when we talk about this section of meal planning and like just the fact that our lives are so busy, and as coaches are just owners of our own lives, we're really doing our best with our schedules. And so, but sometimes things happen, or sometimes we get unwell, things fall through the cracks sometimes, so we really need to have that grace with ourselves and that self-compassion, but doing our best to know that this is going to happen sometimes. So things that I find to be helpful are like have some ideas of places that you go to that you may want to eat, like maybe restaurants or places that you want to pick up food where you know that they're willing to make adjustments or like modifications for what your dietary needs may be, or you just know that you like those items and you know that you can make changes. Like for example, when Dr. Louise mentioned that her pesto, instead of having like maybe a creamy base that may be based out of dairy, maybe instead she uses avocado. So things like that, where maybe they use different ingredients, so that you can at least make those modifications for your own health and your own well-being.
So yes, absolutely. And something here that I always keep in mind for myself as well, and I tell my clients, and that goes for basically everything in life, follow that 80-20 rules, where you want to be doing one thing 80% of the time, and then you leave the not so good or the foods to avoid 20% of the time. So the goal is to be really good and follow the plan ideally for 80% of the time. And then for me, it's always chips and croissants. Those are my favorite things that I cannot live without. I just make sure that I manage and I restrict how often I eat them. Just to make sure that with the rest of it, I've tried not eating them, it does not work. So now I'm like, okay, how do I make this sustainable? And yes, we can't just be eating very clean all the time. We're not machines. And that can actually add an extra layer of stress. So knowing that we have those 20% to play with also can help reduce some of the stress, or at least not add more stress on top of what we're already feeling.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it sounds more sustainable, and also more it feels like it prevents feeling deprived unless somebody desires to make those changes, like for you, like with the croissants, for example, chips and croissants. It's like, yeah, I totally get that. Some, like, we all have our things that we really enjoy, and sometimes you want to part ways with them, but sometimes you don't want to. So it's nice to know that you don't have to eliminate it to point zero unless you desire to do that.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the end of this video. So we talked about 5 tips to eat well, particularly when you're stressed. Tip number 1 was plan ahead. So make sure you do have a plan. Tip number 2 is batch cooking. Prepare your food at the same time for multiple days at a time. Number 3, add some smoothies so that you can add some leafy greens into your day. And number 4 is learn to cook. Highly encourage, however you want to do it, learn to cook. And number 5, yes, have a plan, but also make sure that you have backups when things don't work out.
Absolutely. So beautifully said, Dr. Louise. And we also want to let you know that we have extra goodies for you as well, other things that we've been working on. So for one of those things, I invite you to check the link below, because I wrote an article for canfitpro magazine. So that's a fitness magazine based out of Canada. And canfitpro is the organization that both Dr. Louise and I are pro trainers for. And so in this article, I talked about emotional eating and very quick and easy to enforce tips for how you can help your clients and help yourself with managing cravings and dealing with emotional eating, because this is an area of focus for me. And Dr. Louise also has published her article to her mailing list about the Mind Diet. So check the link as well so that you can tune into that as well and join Dr. Louise's mailing list if you're interested too. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Dr. Louise, for being with us. So happy to have you.
Me, it's always a pleasure.
Awesome. See you all later.
Bye.